Welcome again to a program we call Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. Today I've invited to this program one of the landmark people of the art scene of El Paso, Texas. His name is Bill Rackocy. Bill, welcome.
It's a pleasure, sir. Yes.
A while ago when you greeted me, you said howdy. Where did this howdy come from? Are you a native El Pasoan, or where did you come from?
Well, actually, I was born in Youngstown, Ohio, which was a big steel community.
Okay.
And my dad had been in the 7th Cavalry in 1914, 15, and 16, and he was out on the border here in some of the action.
Wow, the Mexican Revolution action going on.
Yes,
Yes,
the beginning of the Mexican Revolution.
Wow.
And so when I was a child, I'd play with his cavalry gloves, put his cavalry pants, trousers on, which was a little large for
Playing
me.
soldier.
But, you know, playing soldier, that sort of thing, my brother and I. And so he had told me many stories about his tour out here.
So he went back to Ohio, and you heard these stories.
He went back to Ohio then, and he was an auto mechanic, and he was one of the best. And they worked on Franklin engines, Franklin automobiles, and I don't think many people will recall that.
Never heard it. Well, how did you find your way here?
Well, I've always been fascinated with the West. As a child, I'd read Western stories, and of course, in geography class, you know, you learn all about the country. And
you heard about Billy the Kid.
Yeah, Billy the Kid and Pancho Villa and so forth. So I guess I was inherently a Westerner, and so I came out on a couple sketch trips when I was a young boy. And I had a buddy, a Polish lad by the name of Kwaczynski. He was a very talented kid. We were in art school together, or art class, not art school as such. Later on, we would go to art school. After the war.
World War II?
Yeah, World War II. I was in the Seabees in World War II. I was in for 3 years, and I had the opportunity to partake in 2 invasions, one in the Philippine Islands, which was the Central Philippines. I was about 19 years old.
Now, Seabees is Navy.
Seabees, yeah, Navy. And we built airfields is what we did. And we made airstrips in little cities and put up Quonset hut cities.
Okay.
And we were there about 6 months or so, and then about August 6th, when the A-bomb was dropped on Japan, the war was pretty much over, and we got orders to go up and occupy an island in the Southwest Pacific, really the far Southwest, called Marcus Island, which was just a dot in the ocean.
Were you doing sketches over there during the war?
I did a little bit. I kept my sketchbook with me at all times, and I did hundreds of sketches of GIs, and they sent the sketches home, and sometimes I would do an oil study of the kids and so forth when I had time on my own. Of course, when the war was over, we had a lot of time.
So where did you go to art school? When you came back from the war, you went to art school?
I got the GI Bill, which was a wonderful thing that happened. The government doesn't always do outstanding things, and hundreds of thousands of young lads had the opportunity to go to college. I went to art school at the Kansas City Art Institute, and I got my academic work there, 1 year of work there, and I finally got my degree, a Master of Fine Arts degree.
You ever go to the Art Institute in Chicago?
I took some classes at night up there, just a few, and it was kind of frightening to walk in one of those classes with all the students crowded together, and the life model up there on the stand, and
you're talking about nude model?
A nude model.
Okay.
for everyone to see and paint and draw. So that was my first introduction to serious art. But from then on, I just followed that trail.
When did you become a permanent resident of El Paso?
Well, I had an opportunity to teach at a small college up in Artesia, New Mexico. I had worked in advertising for a number of years, and I was advertising manager for the Isley Dairy Company and the Midwest Division of National Tea. So I used my drawing and my salesmanship in helping to create these ads and so forth. And so that's where I worked for a couple of years, and then I had the opportunity to teach out in New Mexico, so that's where I went to then.
Did you come from Artesia to El Paso?
Yes, and I had an opportunity, an opening at the Museum of Art here in El Paso, and I answered the ad, and I got the job as curator. Okay. So I worked with that, doing that for about 15 or so years.
I know that you and I and my wife have a little bit of a connection here, because you have worked also with what's called the International Museum of Art.
Yes, yes.
And then my wife and I, we are Santa and Mrs. Claus for some of their programs. And and we also belong to the National Society of Arts and Letters together.
Good.
So tell us a little bit about the working with the Art Museum and then the International Museum of Art. I know you had a major project at the International Museum, the Pancho Villa or Juarez Room. Tell us about this.
Actually, when I was curator at the museum, we had the job to decorate the Wilderness Park Museum, which later became the Archaeology Museum, and also to decorate the History Museum, which was out on I-10, about 10 or 15 miles outside of town. Fred Hervey was the mayor then, and he was kind of the man behind the action to make it happen. And so it was my job to help to pull those museums together and to put exhibits in, and we ended up painting a lot of the large dioramas, and we employed about 5 or 6 local artists, Bill Kwaczynski and Mario Pata and fellows like that have gone on to do well in the art field, and we painted those sets in effect, and had the support institutions help flesh out the museums, which was done.
Well, that's a big assignment to try.
Well,
to
it
pull all
was.
this
It was a heck of a challenge to do, and now they moved the History Museum downtown, and it's a bigger facility, but they had a little trouble getting it going. But they have a new director down there now, and I think they're coming along quite nicely.
Tell me about some of the most interesting artists that you have known and worked with in El Paso.
Well, of course, Peter Hurd was probably the best known that had an association with El Paso, excuse me, in the West. I had always admired his work, even as a high school student. He had a tremendous ability to portray reality, but with such a flair for color and content and so forth that his works became very, very special.
Okay, that's one. Can you name another one?
And
Jose
the other,
Cisneros.
Yeah, Cisneros. I knew Cisneros for about 20 some years, and I'd stop by to see him occasionally, and we'd have chit chats on art. And I owned some of his prints. I bought some of his prints, and then I got to know Manuel Acosta pretty well. We became friends.
Okay, now I have a question for you. Which media do you prefer working in? What do you specialize in?
Well, of course, drawing is the guts of all art. I mean, a lot of people won't agree to that and don't buy that, but it really is. It's the ability to see form and shape and design and texture, so forth. And drawing in charcoal is really a wonderful technique, or Conti crayon or things like that, or chalk, or drawing with a brush even. But all the great masters were great draftsmen to begin with. And I think this is where too many artists make an error today. They want to be painters right away. Yeah. Dive in and paint with all the wonderful colors and so forth, and the great art supplies that we have now. But I say that a student should keep a sketchbook first. He should learn his ABCs, the basics.
Yeah.
Line, color, shape, form, design, that sort of texture.
Learn how to paint the hands, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Sketch the hands. I noticed the way you're using your hands.
Hands are about the most complex thing you can do, but in art school, my gosh, you do hands and legs and arms for a year or two, and you never change from then on. Allegedly, you master that, and that becomes the guts of most of the art that you do later on in life.
I've been to a number of your exhibits fairly recently. Here we are in the latter part of 2009. And sometimes the people that I'm watching looking at your artwork, they talk about you being a Western impressionist, that you're not trying to make exactly lifelike on the wall there, but the impression of it. How do you feel about that kind of title?
Well, there's a lot to that, and I think an artist has to take a personal viewpoint to the subject that he's painting or drawing or sketching or trying to portray. And you can't do otherwise. I mean, everyone is born with some innate ability to do something. And of course, life is just a matter of sharpening what you do, whether it be speaking, thinking,
right,
politics, or whatever.
So you paint it as you see it.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I paint it
put your
as I
little
see
touch
it,
to
but
it.
I try to bring out the beauty of that particular subject, whether it's color or design or texture or whatever.
Right. Now, I noticed you've recently given some of your artwork to El Paso Community College.
Yes.
In Building B of the Administrative Service area, next to the Culinary Arts Program, and I was there for that particular presentation. Congratulations, and thank you very much.
Well, listen, it was quite an honor to be asked to do that, because, you have some wonderful collectors here, collections of other artists, and so I felt honored to do that, so I gave some of my best work.
Right. Well, we appreciate that with all of our hearts. Now, we're hoping that during this program that we'll be able to show some of that to the audience that's watching the program.
Well,
because we did get some videotape of that at that presentation. Plus, we've done some previous shows where we got some video of your work at the International Museum of Art.
yes,
So
yes.
we hope to be able to show that. We're going to take just a brief break here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Bill Rackocy about some of his posters and some of the books that he has written. So stay tuned.
Celebrate the work of past and various students by recognizing the work.
Well, here we are again with Bill Rackocy, a consummate illustrator, artist, and historian in El Paso, Texas. Bill, now we want to make a little shift here, and I want to talk about some of the work that you've done that I will be able to show our audience. Now, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to pick up some posters that you brought with you today, and we're going to hold this up just for a few seconds here so that the camera can focus in on that. And you tell us about this particular poster.
Well, this is a picture of the old ghost town of Mogollon, which is up in the Gila Wilderness. It's over about 60 miles the other side of Silver City. And it had been a fantastic town at one time. It was a town maybe of 10,000 people, 10,000 people. It's hard to imagine in a little valley like that.
Well, it's hard to get to. You have to go up a mountain and back down into it to get to the town.
You're right. It's a winding road, and it's about a 7-mile drive from the town of Glenwood, which is at the base of the mountain there.
Okay, now how did you visualize this? You stepped back and stood in the middle of that street and put all of those buildings in your mind, and then you went where to draw
yes,
it? You sketched it
actually, this painting was done from an old photograph.
Okay.
I have to confess that, because when I was there, this whole facade of that building was laying down in the creek. Half of these buildings were gone. That town had some tremendous, terrible fires. And you can imagine with a town like that, with all the buildings crammed in together.
So you were a reconstructive artist?
Well, yes, and ended up, I bought a building there, one of the old buildings.
Okay.
And I fixed it up, and my family and I would attend visits occasionally. But this picture was so fantastic that I redid it in color. I did it in oil colors, and I tried to create the moment of this parade going through town, whether it's a communion or what, I'm not sure. But most of the town was Hispanic. There probably 3/4 of the town was workmen that worked in the 3 or 4 mines there.
Because of our limited time, I'm going to have to stop on that one. Yeah. And let's go to the next one. And you tell us about this. Now, this is not New Mexico, is it?
Well, I did 2 books on the Pancho Villa raid of Columbus. What got me interested, of course, was my father was in the 7th Cavalry there, and I wondered what happened, why the raid happened, and so forth. So I got very interested in the personality of Pancho Villa. I've done a lot of research on him and what he had done in the war and so forth.
So this was Pancho Villa coming into New Mexico from Mexico in the famous raid.
From old Mexico, and I had traveled to Chihuahua City once, and I met Mrs. Villa about 20 years ago, and so I've done a lot of research. And this particular painting was one that I did in oil, and it was held at the International Museum of Art on Montana there. Mrs. Miller was in charge of the exhibit there, and she invited me to do that show on the Mexican Revolution.
And you developed that, where is there Mexican Revolution room
actually,
downstairs?
I had done a number of paintings on the theme anyway, and so I had it wasn't that much of a job to do many.
You were prepared for that job.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to another one. This one is very different from those two. This one is...
Yes, this it's just a line drawing. It's an ink drawing, and it's a drawing I made of 2 girls seated outside of a mission church down in Creel, down in Copper Canyon. Mario Pata, who is a fine Juarez artist, I've worked with Mario about 20 or 30 years, and we got some scholarship money once to send him to art school for a while up in Chicago. And at Manuel Acosta studio, we raised this money. And I did this sketch, and it was kind of a stoic feeling with those two girls sitting on the footsteps of the church there, and it was part of the exhibit I had at the El Paso Centennial Museum.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, you know, even long after we are gone, you're leaving a legacy for us to see. just as Jose Cisneros and Manny Acosta and others, leaving a legacy for us. And this is wonderful, serving us.
It's been fun.
The books that you have written, of all things, not only you do art, but you write, do the research and the writing. Now, I don't have these in any set order, as you brought them with you. Do I have it right side up? Yes, right side up.
Yeah.
Tell me about this book.
Well, this was done from a photograph about 1911 or 1912, probably taken over across from a Sarco, where the vistas and the early revolutionarios of who didn't accept the government of Diaz, and here was a casual army getting together out there on the hill and cooking their own food and making their coffee and so forth.
Since I'm not looking at the title, what's the title of this book?
Well, that's the great Western historian Villa raids Columbus, New Mexico.
Oh, okay. So that's about the Villa raid in Columbus, New Mexico. By the way, we want to give you a chance to put a telephone number on our screen in case people, you still have a few of these books left of some of these editions. What is your telephone number?
Well, I'm at area code 915-584-9716.
Right. I should mention for our audience, this man is a dedicated worker because he had a devastating fire a number of years ago that destroyed much of his original work. And then after he rebuilt, he had a flood in the bad floods of 2006, was that what it was?
Yeah.
And this is a man of indomitable spirit and just keeps on working like the Energizer Bunny. Now tell us about this book.
This is probably the best book I've ever done. I've done 10 or 12 so far. I've been close with Leon Metz and people like that. We're buddies. We get together and have lunch and we chit-chat about history and so forth. But I did this one on Old El Paso when I was curator at the museum there. And I had occasion to encounter a lot of material on Old El Paso. So I kind of put it together there, and I had 3 or 4 of the ladies who were docents at the museum very much interested in art. They helped to do research on this book. So Liz Byers was one of them. Liz was a wonderful person, and she helped so much to put this book out. But I actually did much of the artwork and much of the writing, but they helped put it together.
How old are you? Do you mind asking that?
Well, I'm 85 now, and I'm beginning to feel it a little bit.
Well, you have really given us a lot in 85 years. Let's see. Okay, now this one, I want to be sure I have it right. This one, oh, there's Maguillon.
Yeah, that was the book I did on Maguillon. Actually, I've done 2 books on Maguillon. Sometimes when I do a book, and I only do a few thousand of them, and when they're gone or sold out, so I'll do another one. I'll do another version. By virtue of the fact that I've learned more and get new insight and so forth. But this is the upgrade of the first Maguillon book that I did about 20 years ago.
You're a lifelong learner, right?
Well, that's right.
Always something else to learn. Now let's see, this one. I saw you in an exhibit at this location several years ago. You had some of your work.
Yeah, well, this is kind of opportune, relating to the cover here with Cisneros' cover, and dear Cisneros just passed away recently, and he was a wonderful guy. I had the good graces to know him for 20 or so years, and we'd get together and talk about art and so forth. But he did this cover for me about 20 years ago. It deals with Sadie Orchard, an important character in this ghost town. It wasn't a ghost town then, it was a booming silver and gold town. But allegedly she rode through town nude on a horse. Well, that was kind of an inventive thing to do.
She was modeling for the artist in town.
But so I'm upgrading the book now. I'm almost out of these, and I want to do another book. My dear wife Gloria is helping me, and she's learning computers and so forth, and she's doing a great job. But above all, she's a great critic, and that's important.
Our wives tend to be our greatest critics, you know, how we do things. Well, we only have a few minutes left. Tell us anything. What project do you have going right now?
Well, I think the big thing is to finish the Kingston Hillsborough book, upgrade that book. But I paint quite a bit in my studio, and I'm doing some large paintings of Southwestern theme things. I'm doing quite a bit with Indians. Why? Because they're so colorful, and they're an integral part of the culture of the Southwest. And you know, too often the Indians are passed over.
Size-wise, what's the largest painting or drawing that you've done?
Well, when we did the Wilderness Park Museum and the History Museum, we did, believe it or not, about 12 20 by 14 foot murals, and they're all on canvas, and they're rolled up in the basement of the Art Museum today.
Oh no.
And when they put the new museum together, the new History Museum, we were disappointed that they didn't use some of those, because here they put generic murals and things that, you know, they're having to redo the museum now, which I think they're doing a good job with.
Well, there's a lot of hidden art. I saw a TV show recently where a Tom Lee painting from World War II, The Thousand-Year Stare, and it's in a basement somewhere because they don't have enough room.
Tom Lee was a giant, and we're so thrilled to have had him here in this town. And I had the good fortune to know him a while. Fact is, he called me up one day and he said, "Bill," he said, "I have an extra easel here. Could you use it?" And I hurried on over and picked up the easel, and I've used it through the years.
Oh my goodness gracious. Now, what's the smallest drawing you've ever done? You've done
well,
stamp size, postcard size, what?
When I was in the Navy, I used to make sketches on the outside of the envelopes and send it to my mother and father and brothers, sisters back in Ohio. And my mother's kept some of those little drawings, and some of them are as big as a postage stamp, you know. So those would qualify for the smallest.
I have a friend who sends letters sometimes, and he does artwork on the outside, and that's always a delight to see those things on the outside there. It's been a real pleasure. You're one of the giants of the artwork of El Paso. You do realize that, don't you?
Well, I keep busy, and it's a lot of fun. And, you know,
you are definitely modest, but you're right up there with Tom Lee and Manny Acosta and Jose Cisneros.
Thank you.
And Bill Rackocy. It's a pleasure to be associated with you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for being on Perspectives El Paso. And that's another program. I hope that you found it extremely interesting and you'll tune in again. I'm Leon Blevins.